My son builds companies. My daughter builds ideas. That's what my mother says into the microphone. Smile tight, voice sweet enough to sting. The room laughs, polite, controlled, the kind of laugh people use when they've chosen their side. I hold my glass with both hands so they don't see the small shake. My name floats above me like a balloon I can't grab. I'm at a black-tie tech gala in downtown Seattle. Candles glow off crystal. The carpet is thick. The air smells like perfume and money. Quantum Dynamics, my mother's company, is celebrating 10 years of success. Banners with her logo hang along the walls, clean lines, cold colors. Waiters move in a smooth loop with champagne and tiny bites that disappear in one bite. Everyone here seems tall, certain, connected. I feel like I'm standing barefoot on ice. She's at the podium, sleek dress, perfect posture. She thanks everyone, the board, the partners, the exceptional team. Then she gestures to Ryan, my brother, her favorite sentence. And my son, the pride of our family. The applause is louder for him. He lifts his glass and winks like he was born inside applause. I clap too, because I know how this dance goes. I keep my face neutral. My throat is tight. I swallow, and it burns. And this is Claire, she adds, after the room calms, our creative spirit, always chasing something interesting. Her smile doesn't reach me. The laugh that follows is soft but sharp. It slices clean. I feel it under my ribs. A woman in a silver dress leans toward me. Her diamonds blink like tiny eyes. So what do you do? She asks, friendly enough to test me. I'm building a startup, I say. My voice tries to be steady. An app for creators. Before I can explain, my mother chuckles. It's her little side project, she says. Keeps her busy. The table laughs again. Some people try to hide it behind glasses. Some don't. Heat crawls up my neck. I hold my breath until my lungs ache. Then I let it go in a careful stream. I want to explain what I'm building, how it connects small creators to their buyers without
I try to look somewhere safe. The chandeliers are a mess of glass. The walls reflect tiny versions of all of us. I catch my reflection by accident. Too still. Too careful. The kind of face you make when you don't want anyone to see you bleed. Ryan, my mother says into the microphone, why don't you say a few words? Tell us about the new partnership. He stands with the comfort of someone who never learned to be afraid. We're honored, he says. Our family believes in execution, in results. He glances at me like a joke only he gets. We don't chase ideas. We deliver. The applause pops like fireworks. A waiter refills my glass even though it's still half full. My fingers tighten around the stem anyway. A man across the table raises his eyebrows at me. You in the family business? He asks. My mother starts. I'm building my own thing, I say, fast enough to beat her. Early stage. He nods politely. The kind of nod people use when the conversation is over. My face feels hot. I look down at my hands again. They're steady now, but only because I'm holding onto the glass like it's a railing. I steal a glance at my mother. She's glowing in the attention, lit from every angle, soaking in it like warmth. She is exactly where she wants to be, centered, adored, unchallenged. People line up to talk to her. Ryan stands at her side, and they smile like they share a single spotlight. A photographer snaps photos. I see one where Ryan turns his shoulder just enough that I'm half out of the frame. Another where my mother leans toward a partner, and my face is a blur behind a bottle. I'm here, but the pictures are already rewriting that. Don't take it personally, Ryan says later, sliding behind my chair. He smells like expensive cologne and comfort. You know how Mom gets. I know exactly how she gets, I say. He grins. You should have just joined the company. You should try building something alone, I say. He laughs. Why would I? He walks away to clap someone on the back. I stare at his suit jacket. Everything fits him. Nothing pinches. He never looks like he's pretending to belong. I feel my shoulders hitch up around my ears. I force them down. I step away from the table and move toward the back hallway, a quiet stretch behind the bar. The carpet muffles my steps. I lean against the cool wall and close my eyes. For a second, it's just my heartbeat and the slow wave of voices. My chest hurts the way it does after a long run. My jaw is clenched so hard my temples throb. I roll my shoulders and it cracks something inside that isn't bone. Footsteps click past me. My mother's voice floats with them, lower now, unpolished. She'll come back when she's ready for a real job, she says to someone, I don't see who. This little project of hers is a phase. My spine lights up. I open my eyes. My hands curl without my permission. I picture walking out and saying everything I've swallowed for years. I picture her face changing, even for a second. I picture the relief that never comes. I stay where I am, breathing through my nose until the flare dims enough to move. I go back to the ballroom. People are hugging. Ryan is taking more photos. Get in one, he says. I stand beside him. The flash pops. He checks the screen and laughs. One more, he says. We take 3. In 2 of them, my eyes are closed. In 1, I'm cut off at the shoulder. I don't ask for a retake. I help a waiter gather empty glasses because doing something with my hands feels better than standing still. He smiles at me like I'm human. It's a relief I didn't know I needed. When I finally grab my coat, my mother is across the room with a group of men, laughing, alive. She doesn't see me leave. I don't say goodbye. The lobby is bright and empty. I push through the doors into a wet night that smells like rain and city and something clean. Cold hits my face. It makes my eyes sting. I stand under the awning and shake out my hair. My hands are trembling in the open now, not hidden by linen or glass. I shove them into my pockets and feel my phone buzz. I don't check it. I don't want anything from this room to follow me into the street. I step into the rain. It soaks my dress in seconds. My heels slip on the sidewalk. I take them off and hold them by the straps. The city hums. I put my shoes back on and start walking, toes cold, hair plastered to my neck. My phone buzzes in my pocket. It could be anyone, Ryan with a drunk meme, a partner with a polite compliment, a stranger from the table asking for my mother's assistant. I don't check. I don't want their voices in my head, not tonight. The awning's thin. The street opens. I breathe deeper. My heart slows to a steady beat I recognize as mine. I picture a room that doesn't exist yet, with my name on the door and no one's shadow across the floor. I picture code that doesn't crash, people who see what I'm making and don't laugh first. I picture the version of me who isn't holding her breath. Next time she talks about success, she'll remember my name. Not because I shouted, not because I begged, because I built something and I didn't ask for permission. I turn the corner. The rain eases. My dress clings to my legs in a way that makes every step a decision. I choose to keep moving. My hands stop shaking. Not calm, not fixed, just steady enough to hold on to the promise I made at the curb. I look up at the blank night and breathe in air that tastes like new metal and wet stone. There's a low, constant hum under everything, the sound a city makes when it refuses to sleep. I match my steps to it. I let it carry me forward. My jaw loosens, my shoulders drop. The heat in my stomach cools into something useful. I'll never need you again, I say one more time, quieter now. Not a threat, not a prayer, a plan. If you felt that, hit follow, like, and subscribe. Part 2 is where the hobby joke gets sharper, and I decide what I'll risk to make it real. Dad's house smells like lemon polish and coffee. Sunday sun presses through tall windows and makes the silverware wink. Mom lines up the napkins like soldiers. Lauren scrolls her phone with tiny, satisfied taps. I sit at the corner spot, the one closest to the serving station, like I'm part of the furniture.
I'm only here because Mom texted me 3 times. Please. Keep the peace I promised, nothing, but I came. I try to breathe slow. Uneasy calm sits on my chest like a folded blanket that's somehow heavy. This table has fed 100 guests and starved me.
Lauren chokes on a laugh and snorts coffee into her napkin. She always snorts when she's youngest, smartest, safest. I cut a piece of toast I don't want and spread butter like I'm painting over a crack. My stomach drops, but my hands keep moving. Pretend it doesn't matter. Pretend it can't touch me. My jaw tightens and a nerve twitches near my ear. Dad folds the paper with a heavy sigh. You had potential, he says. Real potential. I'm supposed to say thank you. I swallow instead. Ken's daughter started last week, he adds. Your age. Sharp. 6 figures out of the gate. Comparison is his favorite sport. He lines us up like products and checks the price tags. Good for her, I say, too quickly. My knife taps the plate. Tap, tap, tap. 1 shame beat, 2 shame beat, 3. She's your age, Claire, he repeats like I forgot my age or my name. The dining room feels colder. The flowers on the table smell too sweet. I lift my coffee to hide my face and sip air. Mom tries to soften the edges. Let's just enjoy brunch, please, she says, voice barely above clink and steam. Dad sets the folded paper beside his plate. The conversation is a train and I'm tied to the track. I just don't get it, he says. You dropped out. You quit jobs. Now this hobby? Lauren's mouth tilts into that lazy smirk she learned sitting next to him for years. At least she's consistent, she says. They laugh together, and it's not loud, but it's complete. It excludes me by design. I freeze mid-bite and stare at my fork like it can save me. The waiter hovers with the coffee pot. He looks at me, then at Dad, and hesitates. He refills my cup anyway. His pity lands louder than their laughter, a soft apology from someone who can't pay the bill I'm stuck with. My hands tremble. I wrap my fingers around the knife and squeeze until the handle bites my skin. The smell of eggs turns metallic. Coffee goes bitter on my tongue. The chair feels too big and too small at the same time, like it's swallowing me and shoving me out. My skin runs hot. A bead of sweat crawls along my spine. It's not a hobby, I whisper, mostly to myself. No one hears me, or they pretend they don't. The words come out shaky, but they come out.
Maybe I will, I say, but I'll have my own too. The table cuts to quiet, the kind that happens when someone drops a tray in the kitchen. Dad's eyes go flat. Don't waste your potential anymore, he says. He stands up. Brunch is over because he says so. Chairs scrape, metal legs against tile, and the sound lifts the hair on my arms. The air gets colder by a degree I can measure on my skin. Lauren wipes her mouth and checks her phone like she's on schedule. I sit very still, hands gone numb, face burning. I help Mom gather plates because doing something is easier than sitting there. She whispers, "He doesn't mean it." "He does," I say. My voice tries to be gentle. It fails. We walk to the kitchen. The marble counters shine like ice. I set down the plates and watch the suds climb the sink like a soft storm. My chest rises and doesn't fall. I press my palms against the cool counter to steady myself. Heat pulsing, hands buzzing, jaw locked. I measure my breath in seconds. I count to 4 and fail at 3.
Back in the dining room, the trophies on the far shelf catch the light. A football in a glass case, a framed letter, a crystal award with Dad's name laser cut across it. I used to love those things. Now they look like tiny cages for old applause. The paintings on the walls are all boats and long horizons, as if leaving has always been the family culture for anyone who doesn't fit. I catch my reflection in the window. I look like someone I've met in bad dreams. Tired eyes, clenched jaw, the stubborn streak that gets me into every kind of trouble and every kind of freedom. I don't recognize my mouth. It's set in a line that could be fury or clarity, maybe both. I grab my bag from the hall table. My fingers fumble the strap. The leather squeaks. Mom follows me to the door, wiping her hands on a towel. "He's under pressure," she says. "He doesn't mean it." "He means it," I repeat, softer. I don't want to hurt her, but the truth is heavy and it needs both hands. She looks smaller up close. Fine lines web out from her eyes. "He wants you to be safe," she says. "He thinks a job is safety." "I know what he thinks," I say. My throat tightens around the words. I swallow once. Twice. "Thanks for brunch." The foyer smells like wax and orchids. The door opens with a familiar groan the handyman has never fixed. Heat rushes at me, thick, wet, Texas heat that wraps around the lungs and makes them work. I step onto the porch and the sun hits my skin like a dare. I close the door before I can hear anything else. The latch clicks and I feel it in my spine. The driveway is a bright ribbon cutting through a perfect lawn. My car looks smaller than I remember. I dig for keys with hands that can't decide if they're numb or shaking. The metal finds my palm and grounds me. I unlock the door. The thunk is a tiny victory. The heat presses against my chest like a hand. I sit in the driver's seat and breathe. The leather is scorching, and I welcome the sting. I press my forehead to the wheel. The world narrows to the drum in my ribs and the slow creep of sweat at my hairline. I look up into the rearview mirror. The house sits there, big, proud, self-sure. It is everything Dad loves about himself and nothing he sees in me. This place taught me how to set a table, how to greet a guest, how to stay quiet when the men talk. It never taught me how to be believed. "If they won't see my worth," I whisper, words sticking, "I'll build it myself." My voice sounds new, not loud, not brave, just mine. I put the key in the ignition. The engine hums awake, low and steady, a heartbeat outside my body. My hands settle on the wheel. The shaking calms, not gone, just manageable. I taste salt on my upper lip and wipe it with the back of my hand. It tastes like sea and metal and something starting. I reverse carefully, slow enough to see every inch of the house in the mirror. The brick, the white columns, the door I've walked through 1,000 times as someone temporary. At the end of the drive I stop. A final check. My chest rises, my chest falls. The tremor in my fingers is a small warning bell that turns into a metronome. I shift to drive. The street opens like a choice that waited without judgment. Heat shimmers above the asphalt. I touch the center of my chest where the ache lives. It feels less like a wound and more like a pilot light. I don't look back again. The mirror holds a blank rectangle of sky. No house, no porch, no trophies. My breath evens out. In my head, Dad's voice tries one last time. Little, hobby, waste, marry a man. And every word runs into the same wall. Cliffhanger line. That night, I started packing my things. The apartment smelled like dust. The sink leaked, too. I stuffed it with a towel. I told myself I'd fix it when my business took off. Except it didn't. Not yet. I was building a skincare brand with no investors, no office, no backup plan. Just me, my laptop, and a list of ingredients I could barely afford. Some nights I'd catch my reflection on the black laptop screen. Hair tied up, dark circles under my eyes, the look of someone hanging on by a thread. "Is this really my life now?" I'd whisper. And every time, the answer came back softer but stronger. Yes, and it's mine. The first order came at 2:17 a.m. Just one. $28.99. I screamed into my pillow so the neighbors wouldn't think I was losing my mind. Then another came, and another. 10, then 20. Each ping from my phone felt like a small breath of air after drowning too long. I packed the boxes by hand, cut the tape with kitchen scissors, and walked them to the post office with shaking arms. The clerk looked at me funny when I showed up every morning, sweaty and smiling. Maybe this was working. Maybe this was how it started. For one night, I let myself believe it. I even made coffee in my chipped mug and stared at the screen with something like pride. Then an email came. Supplier unavailable, production delayed. Just like that, the breath left my chest. I felt stupid for celebrating too soon. Stupid for thinking I could do this without money, without help, without anyone believing in me. I closed the laptop, laid on the floor, and stared at the ceiling until the sound of the fridge filled the silence again. A week later, the website crashed. I don't even know how. I watched the loading symbol spin for hours, blinking through tears that refused to stop. The longer I stared, the smaller I felt. I wanted to throw the laptop across the room, but I couldn't. It was all I had left that worked. I cried quietly, the kind of crying that doesn't make noise but empties you out. My chest burned, my breath hitched. "Maybe Dad was right," I whispered. The words tasted like metal, heavy and wrong. They hung in the dark air until I couldn't stand hearing them echo in my head. So I whispered again, sharper this time. "No, he's not." I opened the laptop and started over. Bills stacked up faster than ordered. My phone stayed silent for weeks. No calls, no texts, just notifications from apps I didn't care about. Lauren unfollowed me on Instagram. No message, no warning, just gone. Like erasing me was easier than remembering I existed. Mom sent one text. "Hope you're eating well." No follow-up. I stared at it for a long time before replying, "Trying." She never answered. That silence was louder than anything. It was the sound of family cutting the cord and pretending it never connected. I scrolled through old pictures, Thanksgiving dinners, graduation smiles, family trips, and felt nothing but static. Those moments were gone, replaced by this quiet apartment and the hum of my own determination. One night, I stood up from the floor and looked around. Boxes, cables, empty bottles. This was my mess, my classroom, my war room. I grabbed a pack of sticky notes and wrote on them, orders, goals, dreams. They looked ridiculous, hanging crooked on the wall, but I needed them there to remind me that I wasn't just surviving. I was building. For the first time in months, I stopped comparing myself to Lauren. I stopped hearing Dad's voice in my head every time something broke. I just focused on being better than I was yesterday. That became my rule, 1% better each day, even if it was just getting out of bed or fixing a bug or breathing without crying. Then it happened. A random YouTuber reviewed my skincare line. I didn't even know how she got it. Maybe a customer sent it. Maybe luck finally found me. But when I woke up that morning, my inbox was full. I rubbed my eyes, half asleep. Orders, 112. Refresh. Orders, 243. Refresh. Orders, 507. My heart started pounding. I laughed, then I cried, then I laughed again until it hurt. My hands shook so bad I could barely type. I whispered to myself, "It's working." That night, I fell asleep on the floor surrounded by boxes, the phone still buzzing beside me. The soft glow of the screen lit up the dark room like a heartbeat. The next morning, sunlight cut through the blinds, sharp and golden. My head throbbed from the lack of sleep, but my chest felt lighter. I reached for my phone, expecting maybe a few new orders, but there were hundreds of emails waiting. The invitation landed in my mailbox like a dare. Lauren's engagement party, Dad's favorite country club. Gold script, heavy cardstock, a smell like perfume and money. I stood at my kitchen counter, turning it over and over until the edges softened under my thumbs. I told myself I didn't care. I told myself I wouldn't go. Then I heard Mom's voice in my head. It would mean a lot if you showed up, and something stubborn lifted my chin. "I'll show up," I said to the empty room, "even if I don't belong." I arrived in a simple black dress that fit only because I'd pinned the waist. Everyone else glittered, sequins, satin, pearls the size of marbles. The air tasted like cold champagne and rehearsed laughter. Chandeliers threw little constellations across the floor. A jazz trio blended into the buzz of conversations, all smooth edges and practiced warmth. People whipped like they were used to being watched, Southern charm but sharpened like a blade. Dad's business partners were there, the same ones from firm dinners. Square shoulders, louder handshakes, voices trained for boardrooms. I kept seeing the mahogany table from that night, the one where I sat next to the waitstaff. My stomach tightened the way it does before a storm. Dad greeted me at the entrance with a hug that felt like a handshake. His eyes skimmed my dress. "You look different," he said. "Still doing that online thing?" My mouth went dry. "Yes," I said, "still building." Lauren floated into view like a swan, all white silk and perfect posture. Her nails sparkled, her smile had teeth. The crowd shifted around her as if pulled by gravity. I watched the way men leaned in when she spoke, the way women adjusted bracelets and hair when she glanced their way. Attention swarmed her like bees to sugar. And me? I turned into the afterthought, the name tag someone forgot to print. A woman in emerald green caught my elbow. "So, Claire, what do you do now?" she asked brightly. Before I could answer, Dad's voice cut clean through. "Still trying to make that online thing work?" Polite laughter shimmered, same tone as the company dinner, soft enough to pass as manners, sharp enough to leave a mark. Lauren hid a giggle behind her flute of champagne, her eyes bright with petting zoo kindness. Heat crawled up my neck. I sipped water instead of wine, scared I pressed my fingernails into my palm to feel something that belonged to me. The jazz slid into a slow song. A waiter brushed past and murmured, "Excuse me, ma'am," as if apologizing for being too close to my humiliation. During dinner, Dad found me near the bar. The ice machine hummed. His face was soft with congratulations meant for someone else. "Try not to embarrass us this time," he said. The sentence landed like a palm on the back of my neck. My tongue went dry. "I'll try not to exist then," I whispered. He didn't react. He just tugged his jacket straight and walked into the light like it belonged to him. Back at my table, I speared a piece of chicken and couldn't taste it. The fork shook against the plate. I looked down to hide my face. My breath came shallow, like I'd run without moving. Toasts began. Dad stood first, glass raised, voice rich and steady. "To family," he said. "To discipline. To choosing right." The groom's father, Dad's business partner, talked about legacy, about building something bigger than yourself, about strategic alliances. Every sentence wore a tuxedo. Every word felt aimed at what I wasn't. My throat tightened until swallowing hurt. My palms sweated. I pressed my nails deeper into my skin to anchor myself to my own body. The pianist grazed the keys and the room hummed with approval. My heartbeat didn't match the music. It pounded out its own tempo. Get out, get out, get out. Lauren drifted past me on her way to the restroom. She didn't stop, but she tilted her head so her whisper slid under my skin. "Smile for the photos, sis." I did. My jaw ached from the performance. The photographer herded the room into clusters of importance. "Family only," he said, and eyes slid to me, then away. I stood at the edge of frames while people arranged themselves around significance. Each flash felt like erasure. In one shot, I was a shoulder. In another, a blur. The air smelled like hairspray and sugar and something that should have been pride but wasn't. I slipped outside when the music took over, saxophone smooth, shoes sliding across polished floor. The night air cooled my cheeks. The humidity pressed soft as fingers. Through the tall windows, I watched couples turn in gentle loops, champagne light hopping across diamonds. Laughter floated like helium. I felt like an extra in a movie about my family. The star was inside, bathed in approval. I was out here, counting my own breaths. For a moment, tears burned at the corners of my eyes. I blinked hard and they retreated. I didn't want to cry in a dress I'd bought secondhand. I didn't want to give this place salt. My phone buzzed in my hand. Nothing personal, just a newsletter I forgot to unsubscribe from. I scrolled through old messages anyway, hungry for proof that I belonged to a place, to a person, to a time. Nothing from Dad, nothing from Lauren. Not even a thanks for coming, just silence. Big, expensive silence with perfect lighting. A couple stepped onto the terrace, spotted me, offered a polite nod, and slid down the steps to the lawn. I counted the beats in my chest until the door closed behind them. My hands steadied. My shoulders dropped by 1 inch. The night smelled like cut grass and chlorine from the fountain. I breathed it like medicine. Behind me, the ballroom swelled for another toast. The groom's father's voice threaded the glass. We stood in the same air, but not the same weather. She touched my elbow. "Come back inside," she said. "Pictures are starting." "I think I'll stay out here," I said. She hesitated, then nodded like she understood and didn't. She kissed the air near my cheek. "Don't stay too long," she said, and went back into the gold. I leaned against the stone railing and looked up. The sky was a blank, dark stretch, the kind you can pour anything into. My chest loosened. A breath made it all the way down. I heard my name through the glass, soft, dismissive, the way you say the brand of a water bottle you don't like. I didn't turn. I didn't go looking for who said it. The urge to prove something scratched at me, but it felt tired. I let it pass through. I let it leave. A waiter came out with a tray of champagne and paused when he saw me. "Would you like one?" he asked. I shook my head. "Water, if you have it." He disappeared and returned with a glass that fogged in the heat. "Here you go, ma'am." "Thanks," I said. I took a sip. Cold slid down my throat. I felt it settle like a small truth. Inside, the band changed tempo. People cheered. I watched the door open and close, like a heartbeat I wasn't part of. My phone screen lit my palm. I stared at the blank message thread with Dad's name at the top. My thumb hovered. I locked the screen. I could have walked in and smiled bigger. I could have asked to be moved closer to the head table. I could have told the partner's wife my company name, numbers, plans. I could have tried again to explain my worth in their language. I didn't. I stayed where I could breathe. The night stretched. My feet hurt in a way that made me feel awake. I loosened the strap of my shoe and sighed. Inside, they were raising glasses for another promise. Out here, I raised mine to no one. I watched my reflection faint in the window. Woman in black, shoulders squared, eyes steady. Not shining like them. Not hiding either. My pulse slowed into something I recognized as mine. I placed the empty glass on the railing and let my hands hang at my sides. The laughter dipped, then swelled again. I listened until it sounded like the ocean. Loud, distant, patterned, not about me. I pressed my fingers to the rapid beat under my wrist. I slipped my phone into my bag and exhaled through my teeth. The breath shook on the way out and steadied on the way in. My heart wasn't quiet, but it wasn't begging anymore. I took one last look at the glow through the glass. Perfect smiles, polished speeches, legacy poured into crystal, and let it stay where it belonged, inside. I stood in the night and chose air. 2 years later, I could smell the difference the moment I opened my office door. Coffee and printer paper and warm dust from computers that never slept. My logo, clean lines, my name in quiet confidence, gleamed on a glass door that used to be a sticky note on my apartment wall. I still came in before the lights decided to wake up, keys clacking too loudly in the silence, heart beating that old, restless beat I learned as a kid at long dinners where I wasn't allowed to speak. Pride sat in my chest, heavy and bright, but there was a hollowness around it, like a chair left empty on purpose. I touched the edge of the front desk just to prove it was real. My palms were a little sweaty. I wiped them on my jeans and did my first walkthrough. Warehouse side first, then fulfillment, then the tiny break room with a fridge that hummed like it was nervous around me. "Morning," I said to no one. The word steadied me. I owned morning now. Orders had exploded after one viral post. 50,000 in a single month. The number still made my throat close. I hired 3 women who worked like they were building a house they planned to live in. We packed boxes shoulder to shoulder. We argued about fonts like the decision could break us, and laughed at 2 a.m. over cold pizza and crooked labels. I learned all their coffee orders, and they learned the way my hands shook when I signed big checks. We stacked pallets until our lower backs complained in the same voice. When the last collection notice arrived, I held it for a long second, then tore it clean down the center. "Never again," I whispered, and for once the room seemed to agree with me. Exhaustion curled in my muscles, but it was the kind I chose, the sore you feel after you carry yourself somewhere worth going. My feet hurt, my eyes burned, but when I locked up at night, I pressed my forehead to the cool metal of the door and smiled into the dark. Mine. A small local magazine ran a piece a few months in, "The Woman Rebuilding Skincare." They photographed me in bad lighting and spelled one ingredient wrong, but my name looked real in those thick black letters. I took 2 copies home, read them 3 times, and left one on my kitchen counter like a trophy I didn't know where to display. I pictured Dad finding it on a newsstand and pausing. I pictured his mouth tightening, then softening. I pictured him calling. The phone didn't ring, no text, no message, not even one of those short, clipped notes he sent when he didn't want to be bothered by feelings. The silence grew teeth. It bit me every time I sat alone with it. Pride turned into an ache that lived under my collarbone, a weight I couldn't stretch away. Success felt smaller without someone I loved to witness it. I hated that. I hated that I still wanted a witness. One night, after the team left and the warehouse clicked back into quiet, I sat at my desk and scrolled through LinkedIn like a teenager refreshing for likes. Dad's firm, Quantum Oil and Energy, was trending for the wrong reasons. Headlines stacked, massive layoffs, contract losses, market share falling. I read each one twice. I heard his voice from years ago, find something real, and watched the screen show me the opposite. His real was cracking. Mine was sprouting new rooms. I didn't feel the wave of victory I used to fantasize about. The surge didn't come. I just felt quiet, like a person in a church standing under a stained glass window they didn't believe in anymore. I closed the app and let the dark settle. Out of nowhere, Mom texted me late on a Tuesday. "Proud of you, sweetie. Don't tell your dad I said that." I laughed once, sharp, and then I cried, shoulders shaking, palms pressed against my eyes like I could hold my face together. It was love with a warning label, the only kind she knew how to give. I typed, "Thanks, Mom," deleted it. Typed, "Thank you," deleted it. Finally sent, "Thanks." My phone didn't buzz again. I wondered if they scrolled past my name when it popped up online, if they tilted their phones away and pretended they didn't see it. I wondered if Dad still introduced me as the one who tried. The thought made my jaw tighten until I had to rub the muscle like it was a knot in my back. I told myself it didn't matter. Some nights I believed me. One morning, my assistant barreled in so fast the door bumped the wall. "Read this," she said, breathing hard. Paper trembled in her hand. I took it, pulse already sprinting. "Best female-owned startup in Texas." My full name sat bold and unapologetic, the letters dark enough to stain my fingers. My hands shook. I set the paper down and pressed both palms flat on top of it. Dad's voice tried to come back. "Don't waste your potential." I stared at my name until his voice faded. "I didn't," I whispered, and the words surprised me with how steady they came out. "You did." I didn't need him to approve that sentence. For the first time, pride didn't beg for an audience. It just sat with me, quiet and complete, like a dog finally laying its head on your foot. We celebrated with donuts because none of us had slept enough for champagne. Sugar stuck to my lip. I licked it away and laughed with my team until my face hurt. For a while, the emptiness shrank to the size of something I could hold in my hand. Weeks later, my PR manager knocked on my office door with a look I couldn't read. "You free?" she asked. My stomach did a slow flip. "A major oil firm is interested in acquiring us," she said, words careful, like she was stepping across a stream on slippery rocks. My heart jumped before my brain caught up. Expansion, distribution, maybe new labs, new hires, new everything. I asked too quickly, "What's the name?" She checked the email twice. "Quantum Oil and Energy." It landed in my chest like a small explosion, controlled but hot. My father's company. The name that once pressed on my neck in rooms where I was supposed to be grateful for crumbs. The name that used to make me smaller now sounded like a door knocking to be let in. I laughed, short, stunned, no humor in it. My hands were cold suddenly, fingertips buzzing like I'd gripped ice. Looks like the tables. The city buzzed under my windows, all heat and movement and people who didn't care what my last name meant. I stood and walked to the glass like I could touch the sound. Austin looked like a living thing. Streets pulsing, sunlight glinting off roofs, a bus sighing somewhere I couldn't see. My reflection hovered over it, older, sharper, a woman I would have been scared of 2 years ago. My phone buzzed on the desk behind me. I let it go once, twice, then turned. Email notification lighting the screen. Meeting request, potential acquisition discussion. I picked it up. My thumb hovered. My breath thudded in my ears. I opened it. The signature line read, "Richard Calloway, CEO, Quantum Oil and Energy." My father's name. Clean, formal. black letters on white like all the times he signed report cards and permission slips and business deals without ever signing a soft word to me. My lips curved. It wasn't a smile, it was something tighter, quieter, alive with heat that didn't burn me anymore. My hands steadied around the phone. The room felt smaller and truer, like all the corners were finally in the right place. "Looks like we're negotiating now, Dad," I said into the empty office, and the words landed not like revenge, but like a key turning in a lock I built with my own hands. The morning the news broke, I didn't even flinch. Quantum Oil and Energy, my father's empire, was collapsing. Layoffs hit legacy energy giant. Debt crisis deepens. Callaway's firm faces insolvency. Headlines screamed, analysts speculated, the market circled like vultures. I just sat there, coffee in hand, watching the ticker slide down the screen like it had been waiting years to fall. There was no victory in it, no fireworks, just stillness, like the world had finally exhaled, correcting a long imbalance. His empire was crumbling. Mine was rising. Balance. That afternoon, my lawyer called. His voice was careful, like stepping through glass. "Claire, there's an investor consortium looking to acquire controlling interest in Quantum." I froze. "My father's company?" "Yes, they're desperate. Massive undervaluation. They'll take strategic partners. You'd qualify." I didn't speak for a long time. The room buzzed with the sound of the fridge, the hum of everything I'd built. Quiet, efficient, alive. My heart didn't race. It slowed, like my body knew something my mind wasn't ready to name. I whispered, "You could walk away." But another voice, lower, truer, whispered back, "Or you could walk in." 3 days later, I sat across from my lawyer at a long white table. The paperwork was clean, clinical, terrifying. An acquisition through a holding entity, anonymous stake. I wouldn't appear anywhere on the surface. He leaned forward, glasses slipping down his nose. "You're sure about this?" I nodded. He taught me to do something real. This is it. I didn't smile. I didn't even breathe. I signed my name once, then again and again, until the ink smudged faintly under my hand. The tremble wasn't fear. It was gravity. By the time I lifted the pen, I owned 51% of Quantum Oil and Energy. My father didn't even know my name was in the room. That evening, I walked past Quantum's headquarters downtown. Glass towers, polished, empty, echoing grief. People streamed out with cardboard boxes and the hollow faces of those who'd given decades to something that didn't love them back. I stopped on the sidewalk and looked up. The same glass walls that once reflected my humiliation, me in a borrowed dress, a daughter made small at a company dinner, now shimmered in my control. It felt unreal. I whispered, "Still think it's not real, Dad?" The wind caught it and carried it away, as if even the city understood. I asked the manager, "That big corner table, is it still available?" "Yes, ma'am." "The same one your father used for years." "I'll take it," I said. "Actually, I'll buy it." He laughed softly. I didn't. I transferred the payment that night. Symbolic ownership, down to the grain. Later, back in my office, I spread the signed contracts across my desk like a quiet war. Each document was a wound I'd healed myself. Each clause was another inch of ground I'd reclaimed. My assistant stood in the doorway, hesitant. "You did it," she said softly. "You won." I shook my head. No, I just remembered who I was. The words tasted calm, cold, true. Revenge wasn't a scream. It was silence, perfectly measured. Power without rage. Control without chaos. I finally understood what it meant to be unshakable. Later that night, I sat alone and replayed his voice in my head. Find something real. Stop chasing hobbies. Don't embarrass us. Every insult was a brick I'd used to build my own foundation. Every laugh was a receipt I'd been saving for this day. And now, my name, the one he dismissed at every family dinner, was printed on the legal documents attached to his legacy. I traced my signature with my fingertip. "I built something real, Dad," I whispered. And now, it owns you. It didn't feel angry anymore. It felt evolved, like I'd grown beyond the need to prove him wrong. I'd simply outlived his definition of success. The next morning, my lawyer delivered the final notice. "Congratulations, Claire," he said. "As of this morning, you hold majority control of Quantum Oil and Energy." I didn't answer right away. My chest tightened, but not from nerves, from symmetry. Life had come full circle in a way too poetic to plan. I thought of that girl, the one who sat by the waitstaff at her father's company dinner, face burning as people laughed, the girl who whispered, "I'll never need you again." Now she was invisible again, but this time by choice. She didn't need a seat at the table. She was the table. Poetic justice, silent and surgical. Hours later, the morning of the board meeting felt unreal, like I'd walked into someone else's life. The sky over Houston was pale gray, the kind of color that blurs time, neither morning nor night. I buttoned my jacket. The one he once said made me look too aggressive. Tailored, sharp, perfect. The mirror didn't show the daughter he dismissed. It showed the woman he made, through humiliation, through silence, through every dinner where he let people laugh at me. Calm. Almost too calm, the kind that hides a storm. The driver opened the car door. The Quantum Oil and Energy building loomed ahead, tall, sterile, still pretending to matter. Its shine felt borrowed now, like a legacy surviving on fumes. Employees hurried past, murmuring about new ownership. They didn't know the name behind it. Not yet. My heels echoed on the marble floor. That sound, once terrifying in his house, now rang like punctuation. The boardroom smelled like stale coffee and desperation. Executives sat scattered around the long glass table, ties loosened, voices low. Everyone was waiting for someone to take charge. No one did. I took a seat at the far end, deliberately quiet, invisible, just how he used to like me. A young assistant offered coffee, hands trembling slightly. "Black," I said, same as him. I wrapped my fingers around the cup and watched the clock. Every tick was another second closer to the moment the balance would shift. The door opened, and just like that, the air changed. My father walked in. He looked smaller than I remembered, thinner, older, weighed down by pride cracking under the surface. His suit didn't fit right anymore. His shoulders slouched just enough to betray the stress. "Let's get this started," he said, dropping his briefcase onto the table. He didn't notice me. Not yet. He never really saw me. Not then, not now. He started speaking, that same performative tone he used at every company dinner, every Christmas speech. "Quantum's restructuring will secure the company's future. We'll come back stronger." It was the same speech I'd heard 100 times. The words that once made me feel small now sounded hollow. No one believed him. Neither did I. The chairman cleared. "Hi, Dad," I said softly. No one moved. You could hear the hum of the projector, the shuffle of a pen dropping to the floor. He blinked, as if trying to convince himself it wasn't real. What is this?" I kept my voice even. "You told me to build something real, so I did." He looked around the room, searching for support. No one met his eyes. The same men who used to laugh at his jokes now stared at their papers like they'd forgotten how to breathe. "This isn't a joke," he stammered. "You can't—" I slid a document across the table, neat, thick, final. "Check the filings," I said. He flipped through the pages with shaking hands. My name repeated line after line, black ink where his once ruled. By the last page, his hands were trembling so hard the papers slipped. He caught them just before they hit the floor. He sat down slowly, eyes hollow. "You can't be serious." I've never been more serious in my life. I remembered every look of disappointment, every time he spoke over me, every polite chuckle that followed his "she tried college" story. And now, the same silence that once humiliated me filled the room again, but this time, it was his to wear. Someone whispered, "She's the new owner?" No one corrected them. He looked at me again, the same sharp eyes but dimmer now. "What have you done?" I met his gaze, steady. "Exactly what you taught me to," I said. "Something real." He flinched, just slightly, but I saw it. The chairman coughed into his hand. "Well then, welcome aboard, Miss Calloway." I sat back down, my rightful seat now. My father stared at the table the same way I used to. No words left, no voice of authority, just silence, thick and suffocating. The stillness screamed louder than anger ever could. The meeting went on, technically. Numbers, projections, strategy, all meaningless sounds. I didn't hear any of it. My eyes drifted to the skyline beyond the window, the city that raised me when he wouldn't. Houston looked golden, endless. The same skyline he once said I'd...
The room exhaled. People started moving again, pretending to work, pretending they hadn't just watched an empire shift hands. I didn't move. My phone buzzed. A new email lit up the screen. Subject: Schedule one-on-one with new CEO, Claire Calloway. I stared at it for a long time. Then I smiled, small, restrained, the kind of smile you give to symmetry. Welcome to my company, Dad. A week passed after the board meeting, but the air in my office still felt heavier. Everything around me had changed. My name on the door, my logo etched in glass, and yet somehow I couldn't shake the sound of his voice from that day. I knew he'd come. Pride always takes time to swallow, but silence never lasts forever in our family. When the elevator dinged, I didn't even need to look up. I recognized the sound of his shoes, those deliberate, heavy steps that used to echo through the house like Law and Order. Except this time, they slowed at my door. A single knock. A pause. Then a voice, softer than I remembered. "Can I come in?" For a split second, my instinct wanted to answer like I used to, small, hesitant, careful. But that version of me didn't exist anymore. "Come in," I said, calm, measured, not a request. He stepped inside. His suit was sharp, but his presence wasn't. The color had drained from his confidence. The lines on his face looked deeper, older, carved by years of pride pretending to be strength. For the first time in my life, he didn't tower over me. He fit inside my space. He looked around. The glass walls, the shelves lined with my products, the soft hum of my business. His eyes landed on the framed article behind me. From Rejected Daughter to CEO, Claire Calloway's Rise. He stared for a moment, throat tightening, then said quietly, "I guess I work for you now." The words hit the air like something fragile. I studied him, this man who once mocked my little online thing, and for the first time I didn't feel fear or resentment, just stillness. "You do," I said. He tried to laugh, that same hollow laugh he used when covering discomfort. "Never thought I'd see the day." "Neither did I said, voice steady. Then, for a moment, his eyes softened. "You really did it," he whispered. "You built something real." It should have felt like victory. Instead, it landed like an apology that came years too late. He picked up the pen and signed. The scratch of ink against paper was louder than it should have been. When he slid the folder back to me, his hand shook just slightly. He stood, clearing his throat. "Guess I should get started." "Welcome to the company," I said. He gave a half smile, tight, brittle, and sad. "It's your company now." I wanted to say something, anything, but the weight between us was too dense for words. That night, the office was quiet. Everyone had gone home except me. My phone buzzed across the desk. Lauren. I hadn't heard her name in years without feeling my stomach tighten. I hesitated before answering. Her voice came sharp, defensive. "Claire, what are you doing?" You're humiliating him." I didn't reply. She pushed on. "He's our dad. You can't just—" I cut her off. "You mean I can't treat him the way he treated me?" Silence. When she spoke again, her tone cracked, not from anger this time, but guilt. "You're destroying the family." I laughed quietly, not from humor but disbelief. "No, Lauren," I said softly. "You did that years ago when you laughed."
The line went dead. I stared at my phone for a while, realizing how strange it was that victory could sound so quiet. For the first time in years, her disapproval didn't make me small. It was close to midnight when the printer beside my desk started to whir, his first paycheck. I watched the paper slide out, slow, mechanical, steady. When it landed in the tray, I reached for it. The ink was still warm. My signature gleamed across the bottom. I stared at it longer than I meant to. It wasn't about the money. It was about the symbolism. This was proof, black and white, that the power had shifted completely. I whispered, "Just business." But the words didn't sound right. They didn't feel like me. They felt cold, hollow, like something he would have said. Revenge wasn't sweet. It was heavy. All I wanted now was for him to understand, not how it felt to lose, but how it felt to be unseen. I leaned back in my chair and looked around my office. Everything gleamed, glass, metal, polish. It should have felt like triumph, but it just felt loud. The space felt too big, the silence too sharp. I closed my laptop and pressed my palms against my eyes. I thought power would silence the part of me that still flinched at his voice, the part that still craved his approval like oxygen. But it didn't. It only made me realize something I hadn't expected. Power doesn't heal. It just quiets the noise long enough for you to hear what still hurts. The next morning, I found him standing by the elevator when I arrived. He was early, always was. Old habits never die. They just shrink to fit new hierarchies. He looked up when I approached. His face was calm, his eyes tired. "Morning, boss," he said quietly. I nodded once. "Morning." He hesitated. Then, almost too softly to hear, he asked, "Do you still hate me?" I didn't answer right away, because I didn't know. Hate had been replaced by something more complex, something slower, duller, but deeper. I met his eyes. "No," I said finally, "but I'm not sure I forgive you either." He nodded, just once, like he understood that was the most honest thing I could give him. Then he stepped into the elevator. The doors began to close between us, smooth, silver, inevitable. And as they did, I realized how strange closure can feel. Not loud, not triumphant, but quiet. The sound of that elevator closing felt like a question I wasn't ready to answer. The invitation wasn't written. It lived in the pause between two people who'd said too much and not enough. He wanted to meet, one last time. I chose the place, the same restaurant where I learned how humiliation sounds when it wears a tuxedo. The same chandeliers, the same polished floors, the same waiters who glide like they're part of the decor. This time, I didn't sit by the waitstaff station. I sat at the center like I belonged there. My hands were steady on the tablecloth. My breathing was slow and even. I wasn't here to win. I was here to end it. He walked in without moving the room. No nods of respect, no quiet murmurs of his name. Just a tired man in a suit trying to hold himself together. He saw me, forced a smile that looked painful. "Claire," he said, like my name had suddenly become delicate glass. "Dad." My voice didn't shake. It didn't need to. He sat across from me, palms flat on the table as if bracing for bad weather. For a few seconds, we just listened to the silverware around us. "You mocked me in front of your colleagues, and you let them laugh," I said, the heat in my chest flaring and settling. "And the worst part?" My voice caught for a breath. "You liked being the one who said it." He opened his mouth and closed it. That was new. I watched the realization settle on his face, not just guilt, but understanding. He looked older with it. "I didn't think you'd ever remember it this way," he whispered. I let out a short laugh with no joy in it. People remember humiliation more than they remember love. The waiter passed, refilling our water, eyes soft. I stared at the glass for a beat. Then I took the breath I'd been saving for years. Steady, deep, final. "I just bought your company," I said quietly, "and your silence." He blinked, slow. "My silence?" "Yes," I said, "because you don't get to rewrite this story anymore." His mouth trembled. "I was trying to make you strong." "The world doesn't go easy on anyone." "The world didn't have to," I said. "You already didn't." He nodded once, eyes glassy but dry. The waiter came back with wine, glanced between us, and for the first time in my life he looked at my father with pity, not me. I felt something shift inside, not triumph, just a door unlocking without a sound. "You proved me wrong," Dad said, barely above a whisper. I let the silence breathe. "I didn't do it for you." He flinched like the line was a clean blade, not anger, grief. It landed somewhere he'd been ignoring for decades. "I did it because I needed to know I wasn't what you said I was," I added, softer. "I needed to know I was real." He leaned back, throat working, tears threatening but never falling. "Claire," he said, voice fraying, "I was proud of you. I just didn't know how to show it." "I know," I said. "That's the saddest part." For a moment we sat in a quiet that felt honest. No performance, no posture. Just two people looking at the debris and naming it. The wine between us stayed untouched. My chair scraped softly as I pushed back. His eyes met mine, searching for something I didn't have to give on command. "It's strange," I said, standing. Outside, the night air was a clean blade. The city hummed in its own rhythm. My breath came low and light, like my lungs had been waiting for this oxygen since the first time he laughed at me in front of strangers. For years I thought closure would come with fireworks, shouting, revenge, grand phrases to erase old sentences. It didn't. It came like water, cool, still, exact. It came from choosing not to need the last word. I walked past the window and glanced back. He was still there, head bowed, hands on the linen, wine untouched. The scene looked familiar. The difference was the doorway. I was on the side that moved. I kept going. The night laid itself out in wet reflections, streetlights and skyscrapers stitched into puddles. Each reflection felt like an old version of me. The girl at the far end of the table, the one near the waitstaff station, the one who swallowed humiliation like medicine. With every step, a reflection let go. My heartbeat steadied into something I recognized. Not adrenaline, not rage. Life. "He'll remember this one," I told the dark. Not with spite, but with certainty. The line I gave him would live longer than any toast he'd ever made. "I bought your company, and your silence." Not to punish him, to free myself from needing him to speak for me. I turned toward the future without forcing a smile. No weight, no proof to offer, no script to obey. Just the simple, ordinary freedom of going home alone and liking the person who walked through the door. At the curb, a car slowed in the rain sheen, and I waved it on. I wanted to walk. I wanted the sound of my steps to teach my bones a new memory. One where I leave because I chose to, not because I was pushed out. I thought about forgiveness. How people treat it like a finish line. Maybe it isn't. Maybe it's a landscape you enter slowly, or maybe you never do, and you build something honest beside it. Maybe letting go is enough. Maybe silence can be kind. I crossed at the light and felt the night lift around me. For the first time, I wasn't the failure in his story. I was the author of mine. The pen was warm in my hand. The page was open. If you're listening, and you've ever carried a sentence someone else threw at you, I hope you hear.